while, or perhaps our long-standing members, will know that it's very central to what we do. Everything, as has already been said by Paul tonight, everything we do is evaluated. There's a reason for that. We're all here to learn, we're all here to develop. We're not here to show off, get up and do our party piece and go home. We hope to improve. And even the elder lemons in the audience, who will remain nameless, are still here trying to improve, trying to develop and trying to get better. Evaluation is how we do that. Evaluation is what we do to help people improve. What we do benefits speakers, but can anybody tell me who else benefits from evaluations?
The evaluator.
Neil?
The rest of the audience.
Yes? Who said evaluator? Somebody said? Yeah. Basically there are three groups that benefit. The speaker benefits, and that's the most obvious one, the one everybody thinks of, because I'm told how I can improve my speech, change what I'm doing. You've already seen 3 evaluations tonight focused on the evaluator, or on the speaker. The evaluator also benefits because they learn to listen. They learn to pick out the strong points in a speech and the not so strong. And when they're writing their next speech or delivering their next speech, they're conscious of that and they're saying, oh, maybe I won't do that next time. Of course, most of us do. And the third is the club. It encourages the atmosphere of supportive and cooperative help as we go through our journey with Toastmasters, trying to improve what we're doing and trying to become better speakers and better leaders. And evaluation, whether of a speech or of a role, does all of that. So in terms of speakers, which TMI talk about mainly, the benefit for the speaker is immediate feedback. Sorry, my able assistant over here will move things on. Offering methods for improvement. So we try always, when we evaluate, to give a method for improvement. And building and maintaining self-esteem. And that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that even though we tell people how to improve things, we're not trying to do them down. We're not trying to say, oh, I'm great, I know what I'm doing, and you should have done this. That's not the purpose of the exercise. And it's important to remember that all the way through. Next slide. So what happens here is, in Toastmaster, the evaluator talks and the speaker listens. And it's very much a one-to-one, apparently, but it's important that evaluators talk to the room and explain what it is about the speech without homing in on one person and saying, Gowan, you did this, and really cutting the rest of the audience out and making Gowan feel that he's on the spot, or he doesn't, shrivels up and says, oh, don't pick on me, don't pick on me. So it's important that we realise we're talking to the whole room when we do that. When should you worry about evaluations? If you're appointed as an evaluator, when do you start thinking about it? Any takers?
Early on?
As early as possible. You have to deal with it before the speech, during the speech, and after the speech. They're the 3 that TMI say. I think there's a 4th one, but I'll come back to that. Before the speech, you should contact your speaker a few days before their speech and ask them how are they getting on. What are they worrying about? What are they trying to work on? Because as well as the direct objectives that are in the speech and in the manual, they are also perhaps worried about how they stand, how they move, bad habits, mannerisms that have been pointed out to them. Maybe they're very nervous. And it's important that a good evaluator takes all that into account and doesn't treat everybody exactly the same. So you need to talk to your speaker a few days in advance. On the night, when the speech is going on, what do? You listen. You listen attentively. And you look interested. Don't just sit and make notes, and more notes, and more notes. Because a speech isn't purely about words. It's not purely about what you hear. It's about what you see. Do they stand still like this and not move for 5 minutes? Do they walk around? Do they have eye contact? Do they have body gestures, hand gestures, facial expression? That's all part of the evaluation. So it's important as an evaluator that you find the balance between writing notes and seeing what's going on. And that's very often something that new evaluators find very difficult, and even reasonably experienced evaluators. After the speech, what do? Obviously you get up and you do your speech, which for me is the 4th part, and I'll come back to that. But after you've done that, you should talk to your speaker and say, How did you think it went? Was I fair? Was I rough? Did it help? Did it not? Because we have to develop as evaluators as well and make sure that you know whether you're coming across as helpful and constructive as you think you would like to be. So that's important. Make sure to do that. I just want to go on to the fourth bit, the bit about the speech. It's an old page. I have a method which I use for evaluations, and I'm just going to share it with you tonight. We'll have to be reasonably quick, but people normally ask me, well, I've seen lots of evaluations, but where do you start? What do you do? And I start by setting out my speech on these topics. POSE, praise, objectives, suggestions, and encourage. And that's the structure of my speech. And it is a speech. Even though it's an evaluation, it's a speech. It should make sense, it should hang together, it should have gestures, it should have vocal variety, all the things we learn. But I set it out like that. Start off and say something good about the speech and about the speaker. Don't start by stabbing him in the back or in the heart. Start with something positive. Then deal with the objectives that are in the manual. We've seen 3 speeches tonight, all with different objectives. Address them, because that's what people have been working on. But you can also address the personal objectives that the speaker may have shared with you over the few days before the speech. Come up with suggestions then, positive, helpful suggestions. Not go home and don't come back. and finish with encouragement. Toastmasters is all about giving people encouragement, helping them incrementally along the journey. So you tailor it to who the speaker is. There's no point in telling an icebreaker or a number 2 or number 3 something that an advanced speaker would hear. You have to tailor it to what people are, the level they're at. So if we take that as your structure of your speech, the recommendation is, from me, that you give accommodation, a recommendation, and commendation. So you say 2 good things about the speech, 2 things to work on, and then finish with a commendation. If you're doing that, when you're listing your points, and I'll come back to that in a second, you should be ranking them. The very best point, the most positive point about the speech, keep it till the end. Finish on a good note, finish on a high note. Don't start with that and then tell them all the things they need to work on. When you list out all your comments on the speech, the notes that you've made, sort them into 5. A, B, and C should be the top 3 things that you want to tell the speaker. D and E are the 2 things that you think they need to work on. So you start with the second best, the third best, then you give the 2 things to work on, and then you finish with an upbeat final note. When you're writing your notes, you would have seen earlier on tonight that there were different evaluation sheets than there usually are here, for those of you that have been here before, which is this longer sheet. And that's a good model to take, but you should do your own version of it. And normally these are the kind of 5 areas that you would try and list down. And keep an eye on what people are doing under these headings. What's the structure of their speech like? What's their voice, content, pace, pitch, variety around? Language, do they use triads, alliteration, metaphors? Body actions, do they stand stock still? Are they jumping around the place? What are they doing? And very importantly, audience impact. Do they interact? Is there a bit of laughter or a bit of sighing or crying or whatever? Normally I would list things in that way. I would have a template beforehand. I'd jot down my comments as I go. Then I pick out my 5 items that I'm going to put on the previous page. And then I have my speech ready to deliver. Actually, I got a lovely assistant over here as well. So, guidelines to what you would talk about or not talk about. Sorry for knocking you off there. Remember what you're doing is a speech. It's not a criticism, it's not a critique, it's also a speech. It has to at least entertain or at least stop people falling asleep. 5 points of comment are enough. People can't take any more in. Your objective is to try and help people improve. If you give them a big long list, they'll either get discouraged or they'll have forgotten what the first 3 were by the time they get to the last 3. When you're giving advice to people, talk about how, why and where. Don't say you've great body language and your gestures are brilliant and go home. So your gestures were really good when you were pointing at your head saying, oh, a bit of headache, and when you were limping because you were shot in the war. Whatever it is, tell people exactly what you saw and when you saw it. Because people then can interpret that and use it again. Finally, personalise what you're saying. We don't have the answer. Nobody evaluating has the answer. It's about what I feel, what I thought. You don't have to say it's my opinion, but just say, I felt that was really good, or I felt really moved by that, or I was upset because that was so poignant, whatever you said. So just think about those as guidelines. For when you're doing your next evaluation. Okay. So, the overall message though, avoid being disingenuous. There's no point in doing a whitewash. There's no point in saying to people, you were wonderful, there was nothing wrong with the best speech I ever heard in my life. We all come here to learn. We all come here to get a bit of assistance and advice. And that's what we need. We don't want to be too negative, but be honest. Tell people what you think and what you think will help them improve their speech. And then you will evaluate to motivate. Thank you. I'm just going to pass around this. If you take one and pass it on. It's 10 behaviours of an effective evaluator. A lot of it will come back to what I was saying, but it might be useful for people for reference afterwards. So you can pass it out and take one and pass them on.